Alek Manoah has been sent down, and he's not going back to the Florida Complex League.
No.
He is on his way to Buffalo. Like, this is a true demotion now. This is no longer a scenario where it's a rehab and they need to reset. This is, we can't have you around anymore. We have to move in a different direction. And I think this one will likely land more sensitively from Manoah, because I think, when he first was sent down to the Florida Complex League, I'm sure there was an understanding at that point, even internally, which can be very difficult for anyone to accept, and especially athletes who, a lot of why they make it to the pros is because of their confidence.
No doubt.
You have to have so much confidence. I think in a candid moment, a month and a half ago, Manoah would have said, I got to get out of here. Like, it's really, really ugly.
Right.
And I accept this rehab stint.
Sure.
Send me to Florida, get me out of here, let me reset. This one, to me, has a very different messaging. This is not anything acute. He didn't have a good outing a couple of days ago.
No.
But it wasn't horrendous. It wasn't he couldn't get out of the first inning and gave up 8 runs and got rocked and walked a bunch of guys. It was 4 innings pitched, 4 earned, number of strikeouts, couple hits, few walks. Like, not good, but not horrendous.
No.
And yet still there was a conclusion by the team. This is no longer about you. It's about the other guys on the roster. We can't have you here.
Right.
That one, I think, stings even more.
Oh,
I think this one will hurt even more.
Yeah, and you can call into question a lot about how this whole thing has gone down, because there was no shortage of not second guessing, but first guessing about the way the demotion went down and the way the re-promotion back to the big leagues was way too quick.
Yes.
Like 1 month was not enough. And there was a chorus of baseball experts, including non-experts like us,
yes,
saying this doesn't make any sense. Like, forget baseball expertise. This just doesn't make sense that a month ago this guy couldn't pitch in the major leagues. He got rocked in the Florida Complex, had a slightly better outing in New Hampshire Double-A, and suddenly he's going up against the Detroit Tigers. Like, that made no sense. And as much as he was respectable in that,
he had a good outing in Detroit.
in that first outing, like, the whole thing holistically did not add up, right? Like, why now would you bring him up? And
it felt premeditated.
It felt premeditated. It felt premature. It felt like there was pressure from the player side to get him back quicker than maybe he should have gotten back. The team acquiesced, or the team was certainly allowed it to happen, no matter which way you want to look at it. And now it seems like the predictable result has occurred.
You're right.
But he wasn't ready. He's not good enough to play at the major league level right now. And he's to your point, he's a liability.
Yeah, that's what he is. He's got Manoah's got a 5.87 ERA on the year, minus 1.2 wins above replacement. So
that's not good.
That alone, if you're a guy going out there every fifth day and you are well below a replacement level arm, that's probably telling you everything you need to know. And I think there was certainly an element of pressure, likely from the player and the status of the player and the player's representation, about, I think, in retrospect, them having a planned attack. You're going down for basically exactly a month.
Right.
You're going to get one start here, one start there. We're calling you up. Detroit's terrible. Then the break, and then we reset. We move on with our lives. And that's exactly how it played out. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was basically ironclad when they sent him down.
Right.
Like, regardless of what happens, you're coming back up against Detroit. This is what we're doing.
Which doesn't make sense.
But this is a largely analytical group. This is a group that seems to make a lot of plans beforehand, and they live by the sword, die by the sword.
Yeah.
And again, because of who he is, what he represents, and I think there was an element of hope, of fantasy, and possibly desperation for the Jays, because as much as you were watching Barrios have a redemption year, which he has, you say Kikuchi have a redemption year, which he has, there has always been an element of anxiety hanging over those two guys.
Oh, yeah.
Like, will it revert back to what we just saw a year ago?
Right.
And I think likely, to be fair to Atkins and to be fair to Shapiro, in the back of their minds, they probably always envisioned a World Series pursuit having Alek Manoah as a stud.
Of course.
Like, playing a role of a stud in that.
Right.
So it was
your
almost
opening day starter.
Exactly. It was like forced ignorance. It was like, we have to force ourselves into believing this. and then they brought him back up, and now they've realized that you can't fake it.
No.
There's nothing you can do. You can't paint this any other way than Manoah is a liability on the mound, and it sucks. You feel awful for the guy. You know, it sucks for the team because of the high expectations that came with him. But at the same time, glass half full, Kikuchi, Barrios, Gosman, Bassett have been really good.
That's what I mean.
So, you know, and now you get a scenario here where Hyunjin Ryu, basically a start and a half into his return, he's sticking around and Manoah's going down.
That's the interesting part of it.
Like, that's amazing.
Because those guys have sort of been on parallel tracks here, right? Well, Manoah was back in the Florida Complex League working out the mechanics in the pitch lab. Ryu's coming back off Tommy John, and we were all sitting around here going, well, which one is going to be useful? What are the odds either one is going to be
Which
useful?
I'm not sure we have that answer yet. Ryu hasn't shown enough, and Manoah has the option. They can send him. They can't do that with Ryu. You can't just send him to AAA.
Right. That's a good point. But the point is, like, it says something that even though the jury is still out on Ryu, they've decided.
Yes,
they'd rather see more of Ryu than more of Manoah.
Right.
Think about that.
It's
like, that's not a good sign for Manoah.
Shocking. No, it's not. And the pitcher is in there. The guy is in there. And we saw it. It's not as if it was only 5 starts in September last year.
No.
This was a full season and a half of excellence, of elite pitching, top 5 pitching in the American League. So
elite swagger and confidence that stole the show at the All-Star game.
Right.
Which is just hard to believe.
Hard to believe that it's come to this point where it's such a pitfall. But it is so extreme to the point where this is his second demotion that it resets all of the questioning about what's going to happen with this guy the rest of his career.
Yeah.
Because again, now this is not round 2 of rehabilitation. This round is we can't have you around anymore.
Right.
It's too deep into the season. It's unfair to the guys. We're in a race here.
This is not a developmental opportunity.
It's too late now.
Right.
It's, go down and see what you can do. And eventually they'll call him back up. Likely in September when the rosters expand, he'll probably come back up. I have no idea what they're going to do with him.
Yeah.
You send him down and you make sure that he's still starting games. You're not thinking bullpen at this point in his career. Like, you can't be anywhere close to that. You got to continue to cultivate him as a starter.
You do.
But, if this year continues to be a complete write-off, worse than a write-off based on the statistics, it's not like this was an injury. This is him playing, but it's just not performing. What is the conversation at spring training next year?
Right.
Like, how do you forecast him in your rotation next year?
You can't. But here's my thing, though. Like, what would have happened? The what if of this situation to me is, what would have happened if the more logical common sense approach to the initial demotion would have played out, which is instead of coming back in a month, maybe he's coming back about now, 2 months later. Like, clearly he needed more work on the developmental side of things, which is what they've just arrived at today. By the way, you're going to have to go develop somewhere else because this is the major leagues and we're in the business of winning, not helping you figure out your problems.